Hello and welcome to Quit Your Crappy Job, Finding Courage for Positive Change. Hello and welcome to today's episode of Quit Your Crappy Job. I'm your co-host, Scott Wilson.
And I'm Jeff Hughes. Hi, Scott.
Hey, Jeff. Welcome. And we are really excited to introduce you to Tony Johnson. Welcome to our podcast today, Tony.
Thank you very much, Scott. Wait a minute, where was my drum roll? Okay, there we go. We're good now.
Exactly. Now we're excited to have Tony on today because, if you've read in the news and it's been all over for months now, really kind of halfway through the 2020 pandemic, we noticed this trend that was not inflation, not recession. It was the Great Resignation, right? Where a lot of folks are deciding they've had it with their corporate jobs and they're retiring early. Many people, and I know a few of these, have decided, looking at their finances, I'm going to quit my corporate job. We're going to go move to a cheaper town, a smaller home, and we can make it so they're basically deciding to retire early, a lot of these resignators. But Tony here with us today is one of these resignators, but has decided to take a different take. So we're excited to have him here and share his experience, why he decided to make this change, and then ultimately what this change entails. So before we get into this whole story, Tony, why don't you introduce the audience to yourself and a little bit about your background?
Absolutely. And again, Scott, Jeff, thanks for having me on. So I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area. I'm actually here now. I don't live here. I'm visiting my parents for a few weeks. They live in the East San Francisco Bay. And I grew up here, went to college in Arizona at Arizona State, studied computer science there. About halfway through, I think it was in my early junior year in college, I actually got a job at the software company. I was working in their data center. It was Wang Laboratories. For anybody that's got a little age on them might remember Wang Laboratories. They were a subsidiary of Wang Laboratories. It was the legal systems division, and we automated law firms with Wang equipment. And I worked in the data center there. My job when I first started was to go in and do backups. This is when we had the 288 disk drives that were as big as about washing machine size. And I would move the big 50-pound disk packs, or probably 20 pounds, move them around from machine to machine and do the backups for the programmers, from the day before. I do it from like 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. And so I kind of got acclimated into the software industry working there and got promoted after I got out of school, worked for those guys for a couple of years, had a great career going, and then decided I want to move back to San Francisco and be closer to family. And did that. I actually had a firm that was another Wang office automation company. I had the Wang experience. They hired me, got a nice little boost to move back to San Francisco, which, if you know, San Francisco doesn't go very far in San Francisco, even in the mid 80s to late 80s. And then by happenstance, Oracle, which was down in Redwood City, needed somebody with Wang experience. And so they hired me as an Oracle specialist on Wang equipment. Also, Honeywell Bull, if you remember those guys, Banyan Vines, a couple of other computer companies that don't exist anymore. And so I was an Oracle expert on those hardware platforms, on those OEM hardware platforms. I was part of the OEM strategic accounts group. And so I was always a pre-sales type person. I'd go in and do the demos on those platforms, Oracle, the SQL database demos, and we were getting into the applications business early in those years.
Quick, if I can cut into you, why don't we explain for the audience what classically is pre-sales for those who probably don't understand?
Sure. So pre-sales is someone with an engineering background that can actually go in and do the technical work related to a sales process and selling technology. So my background obviously is in the software industry, but I understood the technology and how to sell it, how to demo it, and those type of things. And then funny enough, a few years later, after I spent 12 years at Oracle, I met Scott, who was my sales engineer, because I had transitioned into sales. I think I told you guys this story before, where I had been a sales engineer. I went from San Francisco down to San Diego to a technical conference with Honeywell, where I was answering a bunch of their technical questions on how we were going to do their deployment, set up their software, and address their technical issues. And my boss had given me the contract to go down there and deliver. It was for the services. It was a $500,000 contract. And they signed it on the spot and sent it back. And he's like, "You're delivering this to me?" They signed it? That wasn't supposed to happen for months. And I said, "They're ready to get started on the project." And he's like, "You want a job as a sales guy?" And I'm like, "Sure." And then so I ended up doing that for 12 years. When I left Oracle finally after 12 years, I was running the entire Southeast region for Oracle. So
Wow.
I lived in Atlanta. They had transferred me to Atlanta. I lived there, but I was responsible for all of Georgia, Florida, Alabama, and Mississippi. And so it was great, but I kind of hit that glass ceiling at Oracle. Did very good as a manager. Had 22 people working for me at one point, including pre-sales engineers. And back in those days, even the professional services people reported to us out in the field. And I would have had to move back to the San Francisco Bay Area in order to continue to be promoted with Oracle, because I was already
Mm.
an RM3 regional manager 3, kind of hit that glass ceiling out in the field. And I didn't want to do that. And I left there and went to Vignette. I don't know if you guys remember Vignette at all. It was a content management provider that was just huge up until the .com bubble burst. And then they, kind of tanked. And then did a bunch of startups at that point. And then Scott and I met at Identify Software, if you remember that, Scott. Scott
Yep.
was my sales engineer there. We had I think a reasonable amount of success there.
Yep.
And then BMC acquired us, so we were back working for another large company. And realize I'm condensing 37 years into a couple of minutes here. There was a lot of other stuff in the middle there. And so we did BMC for a while. Then I did a couple of startups. The last startup that I did was actually founded by many of the same people that Identify was.
Mm.
A lot of Israeli backers. So when I went in to meet with the CEO of Eternity, he wanted to know how I knew all these people on my LinkedIn profile. I'm like, well, I worked with them when we were at Identify. And so anyway, got that job. I've been doing that for the last 12 years, and we were acquired by Riverbed Technologies back in 2016. And so my focus has been for the last 12 years on the public sector business. I had worked up until just recently exclusively with the Department of Defense. So the Army, Navy, Marine Corps, Air Force, and hundreds of other agencies people have probably never heard of, SOCOM. I mean, it just goes on and on, all these agencies, in supporting end user application performance monitoring solutions in that space. And we're very successful division of that. Was very happy and did great there until 2018 when they reorged me out of a job.
Mm.
They basically said, "You've done such a great job as your last official function with the company. Can you come in and train all the other salespeople to do what you do?" And I'm like,
Wow.
"Okay, all right." The VP talked me into it. I did it, and I don't know what I was going to do after that. But a partner hired me who also sold that same technology on behalf of Riverbed. So I took all that intellectual property with me, went to this partner, NTS, Next Tech Technology, and I sold the hell. Excuse me, Scott. I sold the heck out of Eternity is the name of the software, and Riverbed itself sold like $500,000 on a $12 million quota, and I sold the rest at the partner. So in 2019, they said, "Do you want to come back?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah, if the price is right, sure. Yeah, we can probably work out a deal." And I did come back in 2019, late 2019, and they did it again a couple of months ago. They reorged me out of the same job again, and we had just tremendous growth. We're a $50 million business unit now. I was handling all of the public sector, all of the DoD stuff, and my boss did not want this to happen. I mean, he was like, "No, we need this." We were considered overlays. I was considered an overlay. So they're basically paying double compensation to people. But when we're talking about deals that are worth $11 million, $12 million, everybody gets paid. The company makes $9 million. Okay, so the company should be pretty happy with that. But we were sold to another venture capitalist firm is what ended up happening. And they're like, "We don't need overlays. You get the standard reps doing this." Because I overlaid 12 DoD reps and 6 Intel reps. So I was always on the go, always on the go, always on the go. And when they did this, they offered me another job to stay. So when we kind of get to the voluntary resignation thing, it was more along the lines of I could have stayed, but I chose not to, even though my position was being eliminated. They offered me the Air Force position to go in and be the Air Force global rep for the company. So a couple of things that the reason why I didn't want to do that. First of all, I'll be 58 years old in a couple of months. And that is, in my opinion, a young man's job. You know, I'd say under 40, put it that way, because you've got a tremendous amount of global travel. You're literally at a different Air Force Base location around the world on a weekly basis. And you're making sure our products are deployed there, that they're doing well, that the customer's happy, that they're meeting the mission objectives and all these things. It's a younger man's game. And I had been having some health issues. I had a hip replacement just recently, so traveling was very, very difficult for me. And I just couldn't envision myself doing that and actually being happy. So I chose to just take the little package that I got and go do this other thing that was already in the works. I mean, we'd already been doing this, and that is, if you want me to jump right into it, Scott, I can,
Well,
or if you have a
actually, let's
question.
back up for
Yeah,
a minute, because
sure.
listening to what you were saying, Tony, I was like, that sounds very frustrating that you did all the successful stuff, and as a reward for that, the company wants to lay you off. And oh, by the way, before you leave, will you finally tell everyone else what the secret sauce is, what the secret to your success is? Will you just do that for us? I mean, it's like, that's
Yeah,
silly. Why wouldn't they just keep you? And then,
you have perfectly summed it up right there. Yeah,
I mean, that's just, it had to
So
have been frustrating.
yeah,
Or just,
very
I
much
mean,
so.
yeah.
I know this happened a little later in your career. You weren't 20 something when this happened, where you maybe would have taken it really personal, but I mean,
So
still.
I've heard of this happening before with other friends that I have that had been very successful in sales, and all of a sudden they start to hit up against that upper quota payout or those accelerators of quota.
Hmm.
And I mean, was that the reason? And they're like, oh man, we got to get rid of this guy. He's costing us too much money. We can hire young bucks in here,
Yeah.
and we don't have to pay him as much.
So I would say there was definitely some of that going on.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in particular, what they did was, I didn't really articulate this well. They split the company up into two divisions. You had the Eternity division, and then the Riverbed division, which focused on the networking products, and the Eternity division focused on the end user experience products. And they actually, when I say divisions, they were separating them into two different companies. And the only division that didn't happen for was the federal division, because things are so tightly integrated, you really can't separate them out.
Right.
But what you've described is exactly correct. At the time I left, they were bringing in reps that were with less than 5 years of experience, that they could pay a base salary of 80,000 a year to, as opposed to someone like me that's in the 150 range.
Right.
And then you're 2x your compensation plan. So you're gonna, when I hit plan, I'm gonna make like 450, and they only got to pay these guys 125 total income.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, there's a lot of that's going on right now to cut costs, and especially with the venture capitalist firm coming in and saying tighten your belt.
Right.
We don't want any redundancy, we don't want any overlays, which is basically what I was. They considered that redundancy, but I can tell you already it's having an effect, because it wasn't just me. It was the sales engineering staff that supported that they're gone now too. It was the
Yeah.
marketing people that
Wow.
supported that. They're gone now too. And so, because the experiment of separating the companies was not successful, so they're reintegrating them back in, and everybody's hitting the road, kind of like I did.
So
But Jeff,
interesting.
you're absolutely right. There was certainly an amount of that going on, where just too expensive to have around.
And it's
But
so common, isn't it?
it,
I
it,
mean,
it is
because of
common, but it's
yeah,
also, it's shooting yourself in the
it
foot,
is.
Yeah.
because now you got a guy in there that, he's probably not comfortable at the C level, sitting in the boardroom negotiating a contract, let alone with a colonel or a general, trying to get
Right.
your program pushed through. And he doesn't give a darn about your software product. All he cares about meeting his mission objectives, and you need to help him do that. And how well is some kid, I use that term lightly, going to be able to articulate that vision to him and his colonels? And his civilian support teams and everything else. So I've already been getting calls. Hey, would you help us out here? What should we do? What would be your approach? Now these are my old buddies, right? It would, like Scott, it would be like you calling me up and saying,
Yeah,
"Hey Tony, can you help me out?" Um, and of course, I would try to do that. But you reach the point where it's like, yeah, I'm not part of this anymore. Kind of
that's
enough's
right.
enough. But it's also got me thinking. Now I'm not doing this right now, but it's like maybe I should just start my own little consulting firm.
Absolutely. Yeah.
If I have time in between the tiny house thing that we're doing. Um,
But
so yeah,
what you're
Yeah.
saying is so funny because it's like I found in corporate America, they reach a point where it's like, oh yeah, well anybody can sell this, and these senior folks are, you know, making all this money, but they're also generating a lot of money, right? The
exactly,
production output is higher, and they don't seem to
exactly.
run that in the calculus. As I heard a senior sales guy tell me the other day, he goes, "Well, you reach a certain point in your career, Tony. I think you'll appreciate this, where it's like you know where all the bodies are buried, you know,
Absolutely.
and when you're young, you don't because you don't have the
Right.
experience. Your network hasn't
Yeah.
developed that
Yeah.
well yet, and so it's often not as easy as just throwing a warm body in there and selling something.
Oh,
You're
go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, I was going to say also your technical expertise. I mean, I know some sales reps and I've looked at them wondering, well, thinking about how come they're so successful. And a part of that is their technical ability, their ability to understand the customer's needs and the technology and how it's implemented and all of those things, not to mention your people skills and your ability to negotiate contracts and all of those other things that come into
Right.
play.
Right.
And it's just crazy to me. Here they have a rock star on their staff, and then they're like, man, we need to get rid of him. He's costing us too much money, or get rid of her, or whoever it is.
Yeah.
It's just unfortunate because you bring so much to the table, from all of those different
yeah,
aspects, and
and
and that's a hard thing to find. That some reps are successful, and a lot of them aren't.
Yeah. No, you're
in a,
right. I couldn't
yeah,
agree more.
in a sports analogy, I like it. And again, this is a very common practice. I know all three of us agree to that. But in a sports analogy, this is like in the NFL where you're getting rid of like a Tom Brady or a Matt Stafford because wow, they just cost too much. They're not past their prime. They just cost so much. And so
Yep.
we
Yeah.
want to get rid of them and get somebody from the draft. And it's like, yeah. And what are these teams, the NFL teams who have actually done this? They find out real quickly, yeah, turns out that experience and knowledge actually equates to more production on the field, right? It's funny.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, on the government side, it really is about who you
Oh,
know
absolutely.
and who you keep working with, because these guys move from program to program. The general gets another star and he goes on to run a bigger program, and you can
Hmm.
call him up and take him out to dinner or have drinks with him or get a meeting where it takes 4 months to get a normal meeting with the guy. All that's gone.
And
Yeah.
Yeah.
speaking of government, Tony, not just who you know, the vernacular, the language for people
Mhm.
listening who've never dealt with the government. I mean, it is a whole other language.
Oh,
And
it
every
is.
word,
Yeah.
every other word, I swear, is an acronym, right,
Yep.
Tony?
Oh, you know it. You know it.
Yeah.
And
I'm
they
not
they
even gonna.
throw things out, just click, click, click on a sentence. And if you don't know these acronyms, you'll be like, it sounds like they're speaking English, but I have no idea what they just said.
You're right, Scott. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And my
So
experience with that, my limited experience with the government has been it literally does take you a couple years to really acquire that vernacular. I mean,
when I first started dealing with the government, I cheated. I found an online guide to acronyms and I just printed the whole thing out. It was like 52 pages. And I'm
but
like, and
still,
I would record my calls. So I would go back and I'd make notes. Like, okay, that guy said CSB. All right, what is that? Now that's a banking term, and it's another term. Oh, it's a communications protocol that the intelligence community uses, for secure cell phones. Okay, got it. That kind of thing.
yeah. But see, what you just described takes you, at least 6 months because it's like learning another language before
It
you're
is.
not looking it up that you can competently use those in a sentence and exchange information and ideas using all
And
these things.
and
Right?
when you got it is when you're listening to a recording of a call that you made with a customer and you're using all that vernacular and you didn't even think about it during the call. You're like, okay, I've arrived.
That's right.
I'm part of this team now.
Right.
So yeah,
So it seems counterintuitive what these
And
companies do.
yeah,
all these things that we're talking about factor into you being a successful sales rep, and it just amazes me, company after company and time again, they get rid of their star performers because all they're focused on is the bottom line. And I don't know, it's so
yeah.
short-sighted. It's amazing to me.
Well, you're right. I mean, you think about that. I had been selling this product for 12 years. The intellectual property I know on every use case, on every deployment strategy, on every question that's been asked, because I've answered them all a
Yeah,
hundred times. Now those poor guys are struggling. And you got sales engineers that have never touched the product. I could do my own demos in the product.
yeah,
It's not that easy. I mean, it's not that hard to do if you do it all the time and you understand the workflow and the use cases. We wrote, my sales engineer and I wrote a lot of those use cases and those flows through the demo, so that every use case would be addressed. And when we got to the end, instead of having 50 questions, they'd have 5. And it's usually about, how long does it take to deploy? How much is it? When can you come show us this? Can we set up a proof of value or proof of concept in our own environment?
yeah,
And we'd be ready for those and say, yeah, let's get engaged. And let's find out if you have the budget. Let's find out if you have the leadership approval to do this. Is your project real? So we'd be asking those questions back, put them in the hot seat as far as, now we're qualifying them to tell us, the right things that we need to hear to be able to come in and actually, do a deal with them. So you're
yeah.
right. I mean, it is very short-sighted, but in my experience, management is short-sighted. So
Generally
Exactly.
speaking. Yeah,
generally speaking, yeah. Yeah.
Generally speaking. Yeah, we'll talk about these business practices, and though it does happen in the medical field, I'm often thinking, I'm glad often that doesn't happen as often in the regular business, right? They're like, no,
Yeah.
no, that top surgeon, he just makes too much. We're going to go ahead and get the guy right out of college.
yeah,
If you're going in with an appendix or something, you're like, wait, what?
Ah,
Wait,
yeah.
no,
Let's
no, no.
bring
Who's
in
the
a
top
couple of
guy?
junior. We'll bring in a
yeah.
couple of junior surgeons instead.
They'll figure
Yeah.
it out once they get you open.
And see, and here's a proof point of that. Scott, you remember when my appendix ruptured and
Yeah,
all that time back
yeah,
then? And it was a strange situation because it wasn't just an eruption and you're in the hospital. My appendix would rupture and it would seal itself off. I'd get really sick, but I'd never go to the doctor. But when it finally had to come out, I called up a gynecologist friend of mine and said, "Who's the best surgeon in Athens?"
right.
And it wasn't the one that the hospital had given me. And I put a call into his office and he called me back and he's looking at the pictures. They were already able to trade the pictures at that time because they had done scans. And he's like, "No, you got a ruptured appendix. You need to get in here. Don't worry about that sealing off. That thing's got to come out. You're going to die." And
Mm.
and just one little funny piece of that story. I think it was 7 days later. Scott and I were at a demo of a customer, and I'm falling out because I'm not ready to be working yet. And I get home, and my mother-in-law and my wife are in the driveway, and my mother-in-law gasps as I'm talking to her. And I'm like, "What?" She says, "Look at your stomach." And my beautiful white shirt that I had worn to that meeting was covered in blood. I'd ripped my sutures out.
Oh
And
no.
she's like, get in the house. I think you had to take over for me in that meeting, if I'm not mistaken. I
Yeah,
couldn't
yeah.
stand up.
Yep.
I was getting a little too aggressive with my, I can do it. Anyway, okay. Moving on.
Yeah. So moving on, so you reach this point the second time around. They're saying, yeah, yeah, yeah. Why don't you come back? Maybe you come in this, and you were like, no.
Yeah,
And so,
that's
why
it.
did you say no this time? I mean, after
Yeah.
this,
So as I said, I didn't want to do the Air Force job. It was just going to
yep,
be too much. Um, my boss was very accommodating. He really tried. He went to management and said, "We do not want to lose this person. We don't want to lose this overlay ability." We had, we were the highest revenue group in all of Riverbed last year was the DoD division. I worked for the DoD director, even though I still handled some other stuff. Um, and we just couldn't work it out. And he understood why I didn't want to take the job, because I had seen we'd had 3 reps in the 3 previous years, and these were younger guys, and they were real go getters, and they knew the Air Force because they'd come from other jobs where they, worked with the Air Force, but it's a tough nut to crack. The Air Force is just, it takes multiple years to do a really big deal there. And I didn't feel that at my age I really had that runway. And I also saw this as an opportunity. 37 years in this business, maybe it's really time for a change. And we'd already, placed the order for the first tiny house, which is what I'll transition into. Is that
Mm.
we're going to set up a network of tiny houses on property that we own and
So
some property that we're going to buy. And once I started getting more and more into this, it took several months for this decision to come down from corporate that the position was actually really eliminated. But I found out it was probably December when I actually found out that it probably wasn't going to get funded and the position was going to go away. But then they had the whole, let's do the Air Force before we got to finish Q4 first. And then we have to do our planning for Q1. So it wasn't until the end of Q1 that all this really kind of went down. So I had all these months in between. I'm like, we need to do this. We own this property. We got neighbors that are doing this. We own beautiful lake property that's recreational property. These guys are pulling down, anywhere from $250 to $400 a night for their homes on this property.
wow.
We own 10 times more land than most of these people. We own 3.2 acres. Most of these houses are on quarter-acre lots. It is in lake communities where you're on a big piece of water.
Mhm.
And so we decided to go ahead and do this. And so we ordered the first one. And then we actually drove up to Tennessee where these things are made. And once I started running the numbers, what could we do with this tiny house? There's all kinds of things that we could do. We could put 3 or 4 on the property. Each one could generate, let's just say conservatively, $175 a night. And if you look at the ROI and the investment, we'd be cash flow positive in no time, as well as just recouping all of our capital investment in probably less than 5 years, which would be pretty incredible as well.
So Tony, let's take a step back real quick.
Sure.
What exactly is a tiny home? A tiny house.
So
And
there's
how did
there's
you first come across this idea, right? Because you're saying, oh yeah, I started percolating
yeah.
this tiny home. But so what's a tiny home, and how did you hear about it and get
Okay,
interested in it?
so a tiny home is really anything that is, there's varying definitions. My definition is anything that's 400 feet or less in square footage that's actually built on a trailer that you could transport it anywhere. Sometimes with a permit, if it's built, 8.5 or 8 feet wide by up to, I think it's 40 feet long, you don't even have to have a transport permit. It's like a trailer. The ones that we're interested in are 10 feet by 42 feet and 10 feet by 34 feet. Those are the first 2 that we purchased. So these are smaller footprint homes that are transportable, that you can haul down the highway without necessarily having a guide vehicle. They're just slightly bigger than the lanes require, but you can transport them just by paying a simple permit fee to the local state DOT. And so these are typically, you can have them site built or they're factory built. I'm not interested in building anything myself at this point. So, we're having a tiny home builder that builds these things. And the ones we're building are 420 square feet, so it's slightly larger than the average, and 340 square feet. I think that's correct. Slightly larger than the
So,
average.
what do they have? Do they have like 1 bedroom, 1 bath, and a small kitchen? Is that
Yeah. So amazingly enough, when you get into this size, which is on the upper size of these things, you have a full bedroom, a 10 by 12 bedroom. You have a full bathroom. We're putting in a jetted clawfoot tub in the bathroom. And a
What?
TV, a big picture
Oh, wow.
window. Oh yeah.
Wow.
And then it has a kitchen that is now you get your kitchen and the living room are combined. They're open, and so you have the great big huge ceilings. And then we have 2 lofts, one above the master bedroom and one above the bathroom kitchen ceiling area. And so these things will sleep. If you put a sleeper sofa in the living room, get 2 people in the master, and you have 2 lofts. That's 8 people you can sleep in these tiny homes.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. And
So,
so the just to give you some this is our first one is going to be very whimsical. It's going to be like an English country cottage. And so it has a thatched roof. You can imagine a thatched roof. Just think of
Wow.
the English country cottage side with
mhm.
some board and batten, with some stucco with straw kind of stuck in it, and then the straw type roof. Now, of course, it'll have an underlayment on there that will shed water and all that. It's really for aesthetics. It'll have flower boxes on the window. It will look, if you look at it straight on, it'll look like a big um, English country cottage.
Wow.
Yeah.
So
And all the
that's interesting.
amenities. Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Really,
amazing.
all
So
the amenities.
I was thinking more like almost like an RV, a
See, a
trailer
lot
for
of
like
people think
people to
like
come
that.
in.
This isn't like that at
But you're talking
all.
10 foot wide, 120 some odd foot long. I think a lot of the RVs you could pull are probably what, 20, 30 feet long.
Yeah, I
This is
mean,
definitely
yeah,
bigger
I
than
mean,
that, but not like a single wide. So
not like a single wide. No, no. So to give you an idea, and you can edit this part out if you want. But we're spending 100. This first one's $161,000 for this first one because it's custom built. There's going to be Amish involved in building it, and the custom builder. That the other one's going to be slightly under 100 grand. But these are high end tiny homes. I guess that's the best
but
way to
just
put
think
it.
about this, Tony, because I remember reading about this, by the way. So when you were telling me about tiny homes, initially I knew what they were because I'd been reading how they've been taking off in a lot of places just
Yes,
because housing's so expensive. And you're
yes,
talking about, that's been one of my frustrations with the way a lot of things have gone. If you're just starting out and you're graduating college, I mean, how do you afford 500,000 for your starting home? I mean, that's ridiculous.
yeah,
But I thought
yeah,
tiny homes might be a way to allow people to kind of start off right
yes.
where they don't have a lot but still have a. And I know a lot of cities are trying to figure out the zoning, if they're going to have tiny home villages or how it's going to work
Mhm.
Yeah.
work out. And you got
Well,
the homes that are container
let
based too, is another way to drop
yeah, let me address that by
yeah,
just describe the business model of the builder that we're working with,
yeah.
because he builds everything from a what he calls an Incredibox. It's $20,000.
Wow,
It's built primarily from remnants from steel door panels.
what a great idea.
Wow.
Yeah, so they
And
cut
that's a great
out to make a
idea.
door right, and he gets
Yeah,
them by the hundreds, right?
yeah,
And this is a really strong structure because you're two
right,
pieces of steel sandwiched together with some foam in the middle. And for that $20,000, you get a portable house on a trailer. You get a living area that also doubles as your bedroom. You get a kitchen. You get a water heater. You get a 32 by 32 shower. You get a toilet. And basically, you have a self contained home that a student could live in, an older single person could live in. So
right.
that's the smallest version of that. And he has everything in between until you get up to like what we purchased. And
Wow.
and now they're trying to get away from custom homes because that takes a long time to build a
Yeah,
custom home and have more model homes, but they have 10 model homes, which is one of them that we're purchasing. And you can go out to it's incredible tiny homes for anybody that might be interested in going and checking out their website. They built about 800 tiny homes. They're in Newport, Tennessee, so it was only about a 3 hour drive from us, Scott.
mm,
That's why I was really drove up there and wanted to see their operation. Randy Jones runs the place, and he's awesome, awesome guy.
How long does it take to build one from the time you order it? When is it ready?
So it's probably somewhere between 7 to 9 months before
Hmm.
you actually get you because they're backed up.
no, but
They've
that's
Yeah.
got
good.
yeah. I mean, that's not that bad, all
Uh-uh.
things considered. We put our order in for the first one in February, and we expect to get that sometime around Thanksgiving, probably. And then the second one will be before he's guaranteed it before the end of the year. Um, and then the Incrediboxes. So they initially took 100 orders for those 10 by 20 Incrediboxes I was describing. No, I'm sorry. They're 10 by 16. I'm sorry. They're not 10 by 20. They're 10 by 16. Um, and he says he'll have all those done in probably 4 months. He set up a
Wow.
separate factory just to build those, built a new building, and he's got a crew that's
Wow.
dedicated just to building those. So they're going to build they're going to try to hit like 5 a day. Even if they only hit 3 or 4 a day, they'll hit those numbers. He's
Yeah.
also talking, and this kind of gets to your question, Jeff. He's getting to he started talking to municipalities that have problems with homelessness and saying,
Mm,
how can we help with this solution? Because we can put a couple up in one of these Incrediboxes very inexpensively.
Hmm.
They might even be able to, for a large order, they can probably get some economy of scale and even get the price down a little bit more, for some municipality that might want to purchase some of these to
Yeah.
address that
that's a
problem.
great idea.
Now, of course, that doesn't address all the homeless problem because it's a very complicated thing, and there's mental
Yeah, yeah.
illness there and drug
Yeah.
use and all kinds of other things. But it's an idea of
Yeah.
incredibly affordable housing in a house that's actually functional.
No, I think that's an interesting idea.
So
My youngest brother has got all kinds of mental issues, and so he has gone back and forth with homelessness. And that's one of the things I know that has stressed my mom is that, well, homelessness is a complex issue, but mental illness and drug addiction play a big role. But these
Yeah.
folks, I mean, there's no denying you want something, some
Right.
type of roof over their head. And what a neat idea. Yeah, a lot of details to figure out how to make that work. But wow, the idea that the housing itself could be so cheap that you could have
Right.
some means of doing something.
Well, so I was reading in the local paper out here that they just allocated one of the small towns around here $16 million for housing for the homeless. And they're talking about buying motels and
yeah,
turning
Oh
them
wow,
into suites and that kind of thing. And I'm thinking, imagine what you could do with these things,
yeah,
you know. But then, of course, there's regulation, and you have issues with water, power, sewer. I mean, there's all those kind of things. I mean, I'm not an
yeah.
expert in that area or not, but all those would have to be worked through. But it certainly seems like a plausible alternative to some of these traditional ways of dealing with the problem that have not worked, of just throwing
Well,
money
as
at it.
well,
Would
because
have housing, real housing.
one of the things I've noticed, what I'm like about what you're hearing about this tiny home industry, Tony, is that a lot of people want some land, right? If it's going to cost, well, building a house can take you a year or more, right? And
Yes,
then getting the land is expensive, and the permits and all these other things. The idea that you could buy the land and put something like this on it just to get started kind of
right.
makes, at least in my opinion, that American dream almost tangible. Well, it's possible.
It's
You're
possible.
starting out, right?
Yeah, I agree that that makes sense. And he's even Randy, the guy that owns that, has even kind of addressed that by saying, let's say that you don't have all the answers yet. Almost anybody can afford to go find $20,000 somewhere. Get a
Right.
personal loan, if you have decent credit, borrow it from a family member, whatever you have to do. And then, the problem is the land, of course. But there's lots of rural land out there that's very cheap.
That's right.
And I know that, I haven't worked from an office in over 20 years. As long as I have an internet connection and power, yeah, I can pretty much work or could have worked wherever I wanted to. And
Right.
I think that a lot of younger people today might be in that situation. Now, land isn't necessarily cheap anymore either. So the land where we got Scott up in Lake Hartwell, we're talking about probably 100,000 an acre now.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's not easy, to get into, land, and then these tiny homes, they're expensive and they expect payment as you go in the construction process. So,
Right.
but if you look at the smaller end of it, like what we've just been talking about with the Incredibox, it's more feasible. But you're not going to step in and do a project like we're doing, investing $500,000 to kind of make this work. And this is just the first part of it. We have another piece of land out in Arizona near the Grand Canyon where we're going to be doing exactly the same thing.
Mm,
We're going to be putting 1 or 2 units on it and make that. It's an hour from Las Vegas. It's 45 minutes from the Grand Canyon. 45 minutes to Kingman. Beautiful area, Joshua trees, all that kind of stuff. Power's already there. We bring in water and septic system, and we'll set it up. And in that case, we may use a couple of trailers, just travel trailers, rather than actual purpose-built tiny houses, because I actually have a travel trailer that we could haul out there that's in
I
very good
see.
shape and put it out there. And these are for the people that want to go out and see the stars at night and just get away from the city, but only be a couple hours away from home.
Well, what a
So
cool way, because you're saying that you're doing this because you want to turn around and do the whole rental, like Airbnb, Verbo, that
that's
type of thing. Is
correct.
that right?
That's correct. Yeah.
And so the numbers you were talking about seem reasonable. What, 100 and something a night or less or
So
something?
yeah, I mean, we think that for the Lake Hartwell property, we can probably get 250 a night
Okay.
because it's a unique experience. And we've only talked about the internals of the house. We're going to have fire pits and saunas and
Oh, the
gardens and
property.
all kinds of stuff like that. I just spent a fortune, small fortune, having the land groomed. We took out over 100 trees, but we saved 150 trees, so we can put the road in, and we can
I
do
see.
where the pads will be for the tiny homes. And so now we can trench for our infrastructure to get the power and the water to the units. And we have our own well on the property, so that helps a lot. We don't have to bring in power or water that way.
What a cool idea.
And then
Because
a lot of these rural counties, like Hart County, um, they have the electric cooperatives will run power to your property at no charge. So when we had a power pole installed on our property, all we had to do was put in the final, panel. That's all we had to do. A 20-foot 6x6 post in the ground. They ran a regular power pole right to the property and then ran the line down to us. So we've got 200 amp service coming into the property, which will run all these tiny houses plus the cabin that we're building on the property as
Mm,
well for us. So
wow.
Yeah. Hey, Tony, are you going to manage at least the local properties yourself, or will you hire a management company and somebody to come in and clean the place between rentals?
yeah, great question. So initially, for the Hartwell property, which is where we'll get started, we're going to run it ourselves because I want the experience of understanding what it takes to run it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we'll clean it, we'll service it, we'll restock it, whatever has to be done. I'm a big believer in getting your hands dirty before you subcontract it out, so you know what that
Yeah.
person can be expected of that person to come in and do it. Long term, I want to do exactly that. I want to have someone else come in and do it. One of my neighbors who's retired has already said, "I'll do it." And she's actually Renee. She's pretty good because I know that she wouldn't take any guff from renters, and her own home is meticulously clean. So I think that she'd be a great one because what actually I want to do is hop in my vintage RV and go tour around the country for 3 or 4 months of the year and let this thing kind of run on, not necessarily on autopilot, but on in an automated fashion where everybody else
Yeah.
is doing the work. And yes, we share, the profits that have to go. I mean, that people have to make money to do that. We're not going to do it.
Right.
We're not going to do it for free. And then replicate that somehow out in Arizona. Now, Arizona being 2,000 miles away is going to require to have remote management. And
Yeah.
we don't have that one completely worked out yet. But, there are small towns near there, and I'm sure we can find a group of people. And there are resources online. There are apps that are dedicated to connecting people to do these things. Like you need a cleaner, you go to the Airbnb cleaner app. You want to understand what the demographics are and your market, you go to AirDNA to understand. You were asking Scott, how did you know that this was the right thing to do and how much money can you get? Well, I purchased AirDNA, which gives me all the statistical analysis
Hmm.
information from all the rentals around me. That's all they do is gather the data and then look at it. And I can see exactly what my neighbor's getting. I can see exactly what the guy one county over is getting. I can
Yeah.
see all 46 properties in our area, what they're getting for how many bedrooms, how many bathrooms, are they on the lake, are they off the lake, is it a tiny home, is it a cabin, is it a yurt? You do all this analysis.
Wow.
Which, by the way, I think yurts are really cool. We might do a yurt one of these days too. If you can get into a yurt a lot cheaper.
What's a yurt? Is that an acronym for something?
No, a yurt is think Mongolian hut.
Oh,
It's a
okay.
fabric covered structure with a wooden frame, supported by high tension wires,
Okay.
and they're very portable. Except how we do them in the U.S., they're not so portable. You build them on platforms,
Yeah.
and let me tell you, I have seen some of these that are built out to the nines, like granite countertops, and
Wow.
they got an upstairs and bedrooms, bathrooms
Wow.
with full amenities. It just happens to have a fabric wall.
What do you think is driving the interest in smaller or tiny homes or unique experience? I guess maybe it is having a unique experience versus going to a hotel and having to share a wall with somebody. What do you see as the driving factors for success in this industry?
So the number one thing for me is the unique experience. No one is doing around us in the rental market what we're doing. They're all these great big monolithic homes,
Mm-hmm.
and I would say that younger people don't mind. They are excited about doing the tiny house experience. It's
Yeah.
like, this is so cool. Maybe we could live this way. I mean, just go out on YouTube and you'll see a million things. So we think
Yeah.
it'll be a very unique experience. They'll have every amenity that they can get in a large home. They'll get a king size bed. They'll get a beautiful bathroom. They'll have a comfortable living room, but they're also going to have gardens that they can amble around into. We're even thinking about putting a wedding venue on there, a small chapel, and you can rent our houses out as a package, the groom's house and the bride's house, and have your
Yeah.
family come in as long as it's more than 50 people. I think that's probably all we can handle on the property. But
Yeah.
I really do believe it's people. Everybody's been so locked up for the last 2 years. They're looking for some kind of escape. And when I see a basic unit that has bunk beds, all wood, of not even a shower, and the guy's getting $150 a night for it, and people are raving about it because it has a fire pit. I think we
Wow.
can have that and 50 other things that make it
Yeah.
just really special. Um, And then, of course, if it flops, well, it's not the first time I had a business venture that didn't work out right, Scott? Hey, I just want to say one thing. I'm probably the only guy you'll ever have on your podcast that's actually shot Scott with a machine gun, and
Oh, I haven't heard this one.
he shot me a few dozen
That's
times
true.
as well, and his kids have
Uh,
shot me.
Paintball or what?
Oh man, that's true.
So about 10 years ago, Scott and I got together, and we weren't even working together then. I think that had ended.
Right. Yeah, we
Scott
were.
called me up one day and he says, "Hey Tony, what do you know about airsoft?" And I'm
Uh,
like, "Airsoft?" I'm thinking, is that some kind of filter that goes on your air purifier or something like that? And he starts telling me about airsoft. Next thing I know, I'm hooked. I'm in. We open up an airsoft arena
Yeah.
together.
oh,
We rented a 10,000 square foot warehouse.
Yeah.
We built a town inside the warehouse with the help of Scott's kids,
Yep.
yeah.
and we ran an airsoft thing for probably, I don't know, a little under a year or something like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And it was a blast at first.
Yeah. We just ran out of time. Really, we were cash
We ran out of
positive
time. We were
pretty
both busy
quick,
with
and
our careers were heating up, and
Yeah.
just
um, I,
couldn't.
I I was having a blast with it though. I'd go out there and, hey, Mr. Tony, I had like 6 of these kids wanting to take me on. I was a little younger and a little better shape then. And I'd hobble around the field. But since Scott and I designed the field, we knew where all the special places to shoot the kids through that they couldn't see us. And
Yeah.
there's some videos out there on YouTube, Scott. You should point Jeff to them,
Yeah.
because that
Yeah.
was a lot of fun. We had a lot of fun with that.
Yeah.
But the straw that broke the camel's back. Do you remember, Scott, that one Sunday we had some little 9-year-old out there, and we didn't want him out there, and his father insisted that he come out there. We had like a 12-year-old minimum. They got to be able to handle
Yeah.
the gun. And, oh, my son will be all right. He'll be all right. He'll be all right. And we stopped the game. The game was over, and everybody's starting to disarm their weapon. We had a place where you could, clear your weapon and do all this. And this kid walked right up to me and shot me under my mask in the chin.
Oh.
And I
Oh.
remember going to Scott, and I go in the background. I'm like, Scott, I'm ready to be done with this. He said, I'm okay with that.
Yeah. Because at this
But it was a
point,
lot of fun.
yeah, Tony, like you said, our careers had started up, our day jobs, and
Day
we're just
jobs, yeah.
traveling a lot. So I was like, this is it's cash positive, but there just wasn't. I mean, it was going to take a little more effort
We
to
needed
self-sustain.
somebody full time to run it
Yeah,
for
yeah.
us.
Yeah.
But
So
it was a lot of fun. It was
pieced
a
it
lot of
out,
fun.
sold it off in pieces, and
Yep. Yeah,
that
we
was
had a lot
that.
of fun though.
But
That's
Tony,
cool.
so you're kind of
Yep.
coming back to this though. I mean, you're at a point where many folks want to just retire. You talked about traveling. Why not just travel now? I'm trying to understand what went in your head to decide, yeah, I don't want to travel around the country yet. I want to start a business. What?
So I'm one of these people, Scott, that for me, it's always been about the chase. It's never been about the end, being rich. We could just retire now and go hang out at the lake and drive the RV around the country, but to me, there's not a lot of challenge in that. I'm like, what's the next thing? What can we build from this? It's the chase of making it happen. And I think I grew up in a family like that. My parents, 82, my mother's 82, my stepfather is 85. They've been married for 55 years. Just this December, they finally shut their business down
Wow.
because they just physically can't do it anymore. And I was brought up with that value, and it's their own small business. My dad was a contractor. He built homes and stuff like that, and roads and bridges. And my mom had her small business making her dolls and stuff like that. Well, it sounds kind of funny. Mom would have a doll business, but she's making 100 grand a year making dolls, and she's
Wow.
doing what she loves. I mean, she's hand sculpting the faces and doing all this
Wow.
stuff. And it's only because her hands will no longer allow her to do the sculpting and everything. They've decided, we're in our 80s. Maybe we need to kind of shut it down. But even my mother says the same thing. It's always been in the chase. It's never been in the end. It's always been the fun of making it happen. And for me, I'm always looking for that next project. I haven't told you about half the things that we kind of got going on because I don't want to overwhelm everybody and think this guy's just nuts. But there's a lot, stuff out there to keep yourself interested, and at the same time, maybe, and some of the other stuff that we're doing to help and do some volunteer work and to help people and stuff like that we never had time for before. So to me, that's what kind of motivates me to want to
So
keep
that's your passion,
pushing.
right? The chase.
It's the chase.
What
Yeah.
you're saying.
Doing the airsoft business, that was fun. It wasn't actually playing all the time that was the fun. It was when renting the warehouse and building the buildings and figuring out how we were going to do the
Building the
games and
business.
all that stuff. That was fun to me.
I remember years ago, um, a guy was talking about. I think it was when Bush was in the office. I'm not going to get political, but there was a tax credit that came back, and I remember a lot of my coworkers talking about what they're going to do with this money they were getting back. Like they were all talking about buying a TV and so forth. And I thought, but see, then that's a one-time thing. And in fact, at my last job I had, a guy came in along the same lines. We were meeting with this new executive who was running over that. And since this is a public company, you can go see what this guy's compensation was. And I remember this executive was like, "Do you know what this guy makes? He makes, I can't remember. Let's say it's 17 million a year. No joke, right? Can you believe if I made 17 million in 1 year, I would just retire and play golf." And I remember remarking to myself, and that's why you'll never make 17 million. You know what I'm saying? For him, it was like the guy's still working because he's interested in doing what he's doing, and the money is just kind of an outcome of what he loves doing.
Right.
You don't love doing the same thing, so you'll have a different outcome, and that's not a bad thing. That's not a negative thing,
Yeah.
right? It's just
Yeah. No. 100%. So to really kind of sum it all up here, I want to make money at this. I mean, I'm not doing it just to
of course,
have the fun
yes,
of running an Airbnb with
Yeah.
tiny houses. No, no, no. There's money to be made here, and it's a growing industry. I've even invested in a company that is a startup, and they are buying Airbnbs, and you can buy fractional ownership in
that's right.
Airbnbs,
Yeah,
and that to me is very exciting because I could go in and buy, and I don't have to manage it. I don't have to do anything. They take a management fee off the top and everything, but you're getting the benefit of whatever fractional ownership you bought in that, whatever revenue comes in from that, you're getting that. So we're building long-term wealth by having these properties, not just our own. I'm going to do
right.
that other thing too, fractional thing, to get me into properties that I couldn't afford, you know?
Yeah,
So
yeah. I
I
saw
think
that,
it's, yeah,
and I think that's interesting because, like you said, and I know someone who bought a house and does the Airbnb out in Florida somewhere. And but that's a lot of capital that a lot of people don't have. But the idea of
exactly.
pooling a bunch of people's money together and
Yep.
saying, well, what if all 1,000 of us or 100, whatever the number is, then buy the collective buys the property, and then you contribute. You get the shares. I
Right.
think that's a really cool idea.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
allows more people to
The way the
contribute.
industry is growing, it's going to work. I have no doubt it's going to
Oh, I
work.
think
People
so
want to
too.
have fun. People want to recreate. People want to get away from home, especially now more than ever. Especially, now that restrictions are easing up a little bit in most places. People want to get out there. I know I do. I want to
Yeah.
go. Just this morning, we were talking about. We have a vintage RV, a 1991 Wonder Lodge, and it's built like a tank. You only get 6 miles to the gallon, but can't have every self-contained. We're talking about coming back out here, see my folks, spend a week at Yosemite, spend a week here with my folks, head up the coast, see my sister in Oregon and other family up in Washington, and do all the places I used to go when I was a kid camping. Cut across, go through Montana, see Glacier National Park, get down to Yellowstone, and then head back to Georgia. And we're thinking that's probably going to take us 2 months to do all that. But we're going to do it. I mean, you reach that. I want to do. I haven't never. Scott, you and I have seen this country from the inside of an airplane and a boardroom, and we need to change that. And I think a lot of people want to change that.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So Tony, looking back in your career, I mean, some of the things you're talking about now is the culmination, basically, of your life's work, right? Being successful in sales and things. So, what kind of
Yeah.
advice would you give to people? Let's say this new and upcoming generation, right? What could they do to put themselves in a position to be able to take advantage of these things or do some of the things you're now fortunate to be able to do?
So first and foremost, I would say, don't be afraid of failure. If you're afraid of failure, you don't act, and if you don't act, nothing can ever happen. So realizing that you have to have the financial resources to do these things, or perhaps you can start smaller, like we just discussed with fractional ownership.
Yeah,
That's something anybody could get into because you just buy a small piece of this and you start building wealth. But don't be afraid of failure is number one. And if you do fail, it's not a big deal. You just pick yourself up and dust yourself off and try again. And don't feel like you can't take the risk, that you can't lose a job, or that you can't, that you're always going to, because people around you are so negative, quite honestly. And I can't speak for everybody, but I know, don't do this. Don't go to work for that company. It's too risky. Don't do this. Don't buy that car. It costs too much. Or I wouldn't buy that car. Well, you just got to get all those people out of your mind, and you got to do what's right for you. Um, and for me, that is, I'm not afraid to take, at the age I am now, I'm not afraid to take risk. And my advice to young people would be follow your heart. If you really want to do something, if you really want to, I don't know, whatever it is, take the risk. So what if you fail? You get up and try again, because almost every entrepreneur that I've ever heard of has more failures than they do successes.
That's true.
So,
Yeah. Good
Tony, I remember a
advice.
bit of advice you gave me years and years ago that I happened to pass on to a nephew of mine, nephew-in-law, whatever. But he's starting out in sales, and maybe you could talk to this a little bit. But you had told me that your goal as a salesperson was to do whatever you could do to try to live off the base salary and just save the commission checks. And I remember handing
yes.
that to him, and he was like, "Huh." I says, "Well, but anyways, yeah, that was your advice. Maybe you could elaborate."
Yeah, yeah. So I learned this through experience, because I'm one of these guys that I had a lot of fancy cars in my time. I own airplanes, all these things. I'm flying myself around the country. And, this is what was going on in that in between 37 years from the beginning to end, especially in Oracle, where you're just making tons of money. If I'd have saved that money now, I'd have 100 tiny homes instead of, like, living off your salary, because the salaries in most of our businesses are pretty good. If you're a sales guy, and you get a pretty decent salary, if you could save that, you got certainly other factors like college education for your kids, and providing health care and for parents, and whatever else might be going on in your life. But saving, that would probably be my number two thing. Don't be afraid to take a risk. Number one. Number two is save your money now. Put that money where it could grow, and maybe start smaller on your dream, but don't give up on that dream. And Scott, like you said, as a sales guy, saving your commissions, even if you save half of your commissions, you get a $50,000 commission check, which is not unheard of in our business at all. Put 25,000 away after you pay taxes on it. You can still go out and have a great time, have a nice vacation, and do all those things. What I never understood were these people that made as much money as I did, but were always broke. I mean, just perpetually broke. Guy's making $400,000 a year, and he's borrowing money from me to pay his American Express bill, and he's
Wow.
paying me interest on top of that. And it's just, I think all young people should be put through some kind of financial course about financial responsibility, because it's so easy to get credit. It's so easy to blow it with credit, and then you're just in this perpetual hole where you never get out of it. So my advice would be, yeah, just save as much money as you can. Start fractionally, or start small. Look at, there's a lot of rural land that's actually not that expensive out there, which you could maybe do an Airbnb on a smaller piece of land. I mean, that land we purchased out in Arizona was only $27,000.
Wow.
And it may sound like a lot, but they were offering owner financing for the people that want it. You pay $400 a month.
Wow.
And almost anybody in this day and age that's a professional could probably afford that. And think about the ROI on this. You're spending $400 a month on the property, and you'll own that property in 7 years. You've got power on that property. So you spend 10,000, you borrow the money, put an old RV on that property. You fix it up, decorate it nice, it becomes a stationary unit there. You'll maybe spend 17,000 in total putting sewer or septic system, water, getting the power run from the street. That's my estimate on what it will take for this property. Now you have something. Let's say you just get $100 a night for it, and your average is $22 a night that you'll per month that you'll rent that out for. That's $2,200 a month. And after you've paid your cleaning fees and all that kind of stuff, let's say you got $1,700 a month, and you pay your rent, which is $400 a month. You're to the positive. What is that? $1,300 a month.
Yeah.
Right.
And what if you take that money, reinvest it in another one, a different place or whatever, or you just have a nice $1,300 a month income, that you can do whatever you want with, but hopefully reinvest it. So and you started with almost nothing. You borrowed the money to get the land. You put an inexpensive RV on it. I'd say what is the total on that? About 20,000 in total that you're investing, that you could, for 25, that you could borrow a lot of it to get a revenue producing property. And then after it's free and clear, you have no more payments on anything. maybe you put some nicer amenities on the property that people really want. You can start bumping the rent up. Yeah, I mean, I think that'd be really cool. I mean, that's what we're going to do with the
Yeah,
Arizona property. So,
Yeah,
that's great.
that's good advice. You know, what you're talking about reminds me of a guy named Mark Burnett. Mark Burnett is the guy who created the TV series Survivor and a bunch of these other kind of reality competition type shows. And one of the things he did to get a start, I remember reading a book about him, is he came in and started just selling T-shirts on the beach. And he saved, like you were saying, all the money he was getting. Well, he had to make a living, right? So, I mean, not all the money, but a good chunk of it to where he could then buy the next T-shirt stand. And then he had 3 T-shirt stands. And he just sacrificed, right? To
right.
where he had a bunch of them. And then once you had a bunch of them, that allowed him to launch, I think, his first adventure race that he filmed to try to do this thing that he wanted to do. So,
If there's anybody out there that's watching this or listening to this, and you're interested in the tiny home community and building wealth that way, including Josh, by the way, Scott. Josh is in town, and
oh, okay.
yeah, and we tell him about the tiny home thing, and Josh is like, "Oh, that's what I want to do." But anyway, anybody listening to this, my advice is look up a guy named Rob Built on YouTube. It's ROBBUILT, Built, Rob Built, and he started with nothing about 7 years ago. He borrowed some money and built a tiny house in his backyard and started generating income through long-term nursing contracts where nurses would stay in this tiny house that he built.
Mm.
And he spent, I think, 60,000 or so, 65,000 on that. And he has turned this into a $3 million plus enterprise now. He has
Wow.
properties in Joshua Tree, California. He has properties in the Gatlinburg area in Tennessee, which is an awesome area to invest.
Mhm.
He's got properties in Blue Ridge Mountains of Georgia, which again is another tourist place. And this is just a young guy. He was in his 20s and
Hmm.
he's doing all this stuff. And he had nothing. He started with nothing except he was in the house that he was in. He owned the house. He got this big backyard in the Los Angeles area. And he's, built that. And it just snowballed into the next one and the next one and the next one. And the other thing that you can do in this business is you don't have to go it alone. You can get an investor, someone like me that comes along and say, you've found the right property, but you don't have any cash. Well, maybe you can convince me. I'll be your partner. Give me 20% of the deal, and I will, invest the cash that I want to get out. But I'm still 20% owner after everything is settled up at the end.
Mhm.
But everybody benefits because now he's,
Right.
generating revenue and can get onto the next property and get another investor. And there are sites out there like the short-term rental shop. They specialize in properties like this. And this isn't a commercial for anybody. This is straight off the top of my head. The short-term rental shop will help you find properties that make great short-term rentals in highly desirable markets where people want to rent.
Hmm.
So, I mean, everything is out there. Do your research. Have some fun with it. If this is something that would interest you, there's a million things in life, of course, you can do. This is just what we've chosen to do, at this stage in
Mhm.
our
Right.
lives. So,
But a common thing what you're talking about though is not just blowing everything. Because when you were describing, just to go back a little bit about these sales guys who were broke making 400 grand a year,
yeah.
it sounds a lot like these athletes you hear about, right? That
Oh, yeah.
they're broke 1 year, 6 months, whatever, out of the league.
Right.
And that mentality is just different, isn't it? It's just like I'm going to spend everything I have as opposed to, well, let me save
Yeah.
to use for something else or reinvest in something else, right?
Right. Right. Yeah, that is the mentality. I think a lot of young people, they just go crazy. They just don't know, and they have bad management helping them out. That's just sucking away their wealth as well. They make bad investments that they don't even know about. I mean, no one cares about your money more than you do. And so, even if you don't know anything about managing money, learn rather than letting somebody else do it all for you. That's
Yeah.
another piece of advice that my dad gave me a long time ago. Is that other than the advice he gave me that I wasn't very good at construction work, so I better go get an education. When I was working for him as a kid. I'm going to remind
Yeah,
him of that when I go downstairs.
yeah. Find your niche in life, but that's good advice. You know, the universe, the world has a way of that negative feedback loop. You know, Tony has a way of kind of guiding you to what you have a best aptitude for. You
Yeah,
know, sounds like
yeah,
construction wasn't for you. I remember just a quick tangent. We can wrap up, but I remember right out of high school going and helping a guy do put on siding, right? And I had to cut this massive piece of foam board to put up on the side of the house. And so I measured both sides and I cut this thing down the guy comes up and lifts it up, and it was all crooked. And I remember I was just dumbfounded by this. Now, obviously, he was a little upset because this was costing him a lot of money, right? That now he was going to have to, because he couldn't use this big piece anymore. And I
No.
remember just like, how can that be? It was 2 feet, whatever the measurement was on that side and this one. And he goes, how did you do that? I was like, I don't know. And it happened a second time. And he was just like, what? And then I was like, clearly this is not for me. I'm costing this guy money.
So Scott, I don't know if you remember when we were building all those buildings, and you and your son were like, "How do you know how to do all this?" I'm like, "I worked for my dad. It wasn't any good at it, but I know how to like measure and cut." And we
Yeah.
were building walls for the buildings in
Yeah.
our little airsoft place, and then you wanted your boy like watch Tony, and he'll show you how to use everything. I thought, oh my god, he's going to cut his fingers off the way he was using a chop saw. I was terrified. I'm like, just let me do it. No, I got this. Tell me you don't remember that, because
Yeah.
it was
No, I
scary.
remember.
It was kind of scary.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a lot of fun still.
Definitely.
Well, Tony, it's been great to hear your story today. Lots of great insight. Love the background and the words of advice. I think, and that's the point of our podcast, is try to help people to gain courage to go try something else if they want to, or start early and take risks.
Save your money, invest,
and save your money. I mean,
yeah,
it's all great advice, and we wish you the best success in your adventure with tiny homes.
Yeah, thank you, gentlemen. It's been a pleasure. I'll keep you posted, Scott, on how we do on this, and maybe send you some pictures.
Yeah, I want to see it. Yeah,
All
good
right.
luck with it. It sounds exciting.
Thanks so much. It's been my pleasure, guys. You have a great rest of your day.
Yeah,
and
thanks to our listeners for joining as well. And you can catch us wherever you listen to podcasts, and you can look us up on quityourcrappyjob.com. We've got a website there, and at Quit Crappy Job is our Twitter handle. So again, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for joining us today. Listen to us wherever you listen to your podcast. Follow us on Twitter at Quit Crappy Job. Find us on YouTube at Quit Your Crappy Job. Contact us at quityourcrappyjob@gmail.com. Music is provided by Kelton Levitt. He can be reached at kelton.levitt@gmail.com.